Have you ever felt invisible? Like the person you love the most looks right through you? For 3 years, Genevieve sat in silence while her husband climbed the corporate ladder. He called her plain. He called her uneducated. And finally, in a crowded London courtroom, he called her a liability he needed to discard. Richard thought he was divorcing a broke, helpless housewife. He didn't know that the woman sitting across from him was the sole heir to one of the oldest, wealthiest bloodlines in Europe. He was about to humiliate his wife in front of the world, but he had no idea that the royal guard was already waiting outside. The air in courtroom 4 at the Royal Courts of Justice on the Strand smelled of floor wax, old mahogany, and the distinct metallic scent of fear. Outside, the London rain battered the Gothic windows, a grey curtain against the world. Inside, Richard Galloway adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Savile Row suit, checking his reflection in the polished surface of the table. He looked perfect, every inch the modern tech CEO. 34, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes that held no warmth, only calculation. He didn't look at his wife. Genevieve sat at the opposing table. She looked small. She wore a grey cardigan that had seen better days, and a skirt that Richard had once told her made her look like a librarian in a failing school district. Her hands, red from the cold, were clasped tight in her lap. She had no solicitor sitting next to her. She had told the court she would represent herself. To Richard, this was just the final confirmation of her stupidity. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Harrison said, peering over his spectacles. The judge was a man who had seen everything. But even he seemed weary of Richard's aggressive legal team. "You may proceed with your client's opening statement." Simon Sterling, Richard's lawyer, a man known in London legal circles as the Butcher for how he carved up assets, stood up. He smoothed his silk tie and smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, my lord," Sterling began, his voice a rich baritone that filled the room. "We are here today to dissolve the marriage between Mr. Richard Galloway and Mrs. Galloway. But this is not a standard dissolution. We are petitioning for a total nullification of spousal support." Genevieve didn't flinch. She just stared at a knot in the wood of the table. "On what grounds?" Judge Harrison asked. "On the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation and lack of contribution," Sterling said, pacing the floor. He pointed a manicured finger at Genevieve. "When my client met this woman, he was a budding entrepreneur. She was a waitress. He lifted her out of poverty. He gave her a home in Kensington. He gave her a life she could never have dreamed of." Sterling paused for effect, walking over to Richard and placing a hand on his shoulder. "And in return, she has been a millstone around his neck. Mr. Galloway's company, Apex Dynamics, is now valued at £400 million. It requires a partner who can navigate high society, who understands finance, who can host investors. Mrs. Galloway refuses to attend galas. She refuses to learn proper etiquette. She is, quite frankly, an embarrassment to a man of Mr. Galloway's stature. She has contributed zero financially to the marriage. She has no degree, no career, no assets. She is a passenger who has overstayed her welcome." Richard finally looked at her then. He leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. He wanted her to see him winning. He wanted to see her cry. "I am offering a settlement," Richard spoke up, breaking protocol, but his lawyer didn't stop him. "I am a generous man, Your Honor. I will give her £20,000, enough to move back to wherever she came from, and I want her out of the house by tonight. My fiancée, Jessica, will be moving in on Friday." The mention of the name hung in the air. Jessica, the chief marketing officer at Apex. Beautiful, sharp, ruthless. Everything Richard thought he deserved. £20,000, Judge Harrison repeated, looking at Richard with a flat expression. "For a marriage of 5 years?" "It's more than she's worth," Richard said coldly. "She cooks, she cleans, and she reads books. I can hire a maid for less." The courtroom was silent. Even the court stenographer paused, looking up with a frown. The The cruelty wasn't just professional, it was personal. It was designed to shatter. "Mrs. Galloway," the judge said, turning his gaze to Genevieve. "Do you have a response?" Genevieve stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She didn't look at the judge. She looked at Richard. Her eyes, usually a soft, unassuming hazel, were dark. "I have a question for my husband," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Address the court, not him," Sterling snapped. "I am addressing the reality of the situation," Genevieve corrected him, her voice suddenly gaining a strange, steely timbre. "Richard, you claim I contributed nothing to Apex Dynamics?" Richard laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You can't even balance a checkbook, General." "You think making coffee while I coded in the garage counts as a contribution?" "And the seed money?" she asked. "The initial £2 million that capitalized the company in 2019. Where did that come from?" Richard waved his hand dismissively. "An angel investor, an anonymous holding company in Zurich, Aurora Holdings. They saw my potential." "And who signed the check?" "I don't know. Some Swiss banker." "What does this have to do with you?" Richard sneered. "You're stalling, Genevieve. Take the money and go." Genevieve looked down at her hands again. "I just wanted to hear you say it," she whispered. "I wanted to hear you say that I am nothing to you." "You are nothing," Richard said, leaning forward, his voice dripping with venom. "You are a grey little mouse who got lucky. And now the luck has run out." "Very well," Genevieve said. She looked up at the judge. "I have no further questions for him, but I would like to call a witness." "We have no witnesses listed," Sterling objected. "This is an ambush." "This isn't a criminal trial, Mr. Sterling," the judge said. "Who is your witness, Mrs. Galloway?" Genevieve checked her wristwatch. A cheap, plastic thing. "He should be arriving right now." As if on cue, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open, they were pushed aside with force. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The damp London air was suddenly replaced by a sharp, military tension. Two men entered first. They were huge, wearing dark suits, but not the kind lawyers wore. These were tactical suits. They wore earpieces. On their lapels was a pin, a silver crest featuring a double-headed hawk, clutching a sword. Richard frowned, turning around. "Who the hell is this? Security?" Behind the two guards, a man walked in. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, walking with a cane that had a silver handle. He wore a mourning suit, impeccable and severe. He carried a leather briefcase stamped with the same crest. He didn't look at Richard. He walked straight to Genevieve's table, bowed deeply from the waist, a bow so formal it looked like something out of a period drama, and placed the briefcase on her table. "I apologize for the delay, Your Highness," the man said. The courtroom went dead silent. Richard blinked. "You're... what?" The man turned slowly to face Richard. His face was a mask of aristocratic disdain that made Richard's arrogance look like child's play. "I am Chamberlain Arthur Dubois," the man announced, his voice clipping the vowels in a high society European accent. "I serve as the Lord Privy Seal to the Duchy of Montvert, and I am here to represent Her Royal Highness, Princess Genevieve Sophia Valois Montvert, in this matter of trivial inconvenience." Richard Galloway froze. His brain stuttered, trying to process the words, but they refused to fit into the reality he had constructed. "Princess? Genevieve?" He looked at his wife. She was still standing there in her grey cardigan, but her posture had changed. The slump was gone, her chin was raised. She looked at Chamberlain Dubois and nodded once, a gesture so subtle yet so commanding that Richard felt a cold shiver race down his spine. "This is ridiculous," Simon Sterling barked, though his voice wavered. "Objection! Who is this man? This is a court of law, not a theatre." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Judge Harrison said, his eyes wide. He was looking at the crest on the briefcase. He recognized it. "Mr. Dubois, did you say—" Montvert? Indeed, my lord, Dubois said. A small, independent principality, bordering France and Switzerland. Perhaps you are familiar with their banking laws. The judge paled. I am. Richard stood up, his face flushing red. This is a joke. She hired an actor. Genevieve is a waitress from Leeds. I met her at a diner. I saw her birth certificate. Genevieve turned to him. For the first time in 5 years, she looked at him not with love, not with fear, but with pity. You saw a birth certificate for Genevieve Sterling, she said. Her voice had changed completely. The soft, hesitant stutter was gone. In its place was a crisp, educated tone, polished by the finest boarding schools in Europe. Sterling is my mother's maiden name. I used it to attend university in England without security details. University? Richard sputtered. You said you didn't go to college. I said I didn't study business, she corrected him calmly. I have a doctorate in art history from Oxford and a master's in international relations from the Sorbonne. I was taking a gap year to experience normal life when I met you. She took a step toward him. I wanted to see if someone could love me for me, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. Not for the title, not for the GDP of my country. Just me. I thought you were that man, Richard. You were so passionate, so driven. I am driven, Richard stammered, losing his footing. No, she shook her head. You are hungry. There is a difference. I gave you everything. I cooked your meals. I cleaned your clothes. I listened to you practice your pitches until 3 a.m. And you lied to me, Richard shouted, trying to regain control. You lied about who you are. That's fraud, is it? Chamberlain Dubois interjected smoothly. Did you ever ask, Mr. Galloway? Did you ever ask about her family? Or were you too busy talking about yourself? We have transcripts of your dinner conversations for the last 3 years. The ratio of dialogue is 95% you, 5% her. Dubois opened the leather briefcase. He pulled out a thick document bound in blue velvet. Regarding the fraud you mentioned, Dubois continued, turning to the judge, Mr. Galloway claims his wife contributed nothing to Apex Dynamics. He mentioned an angel investor, Aurora Holdings. Dubois slid a single piece of paper across the table towards the judge. Aurora is the private investment arm of the Royal House of Montvert. The sole signatory for the fund is Her Highness, Princess Genevieve. Richard felt the blood drain from his face. The room started to spin. That's impossible, he whispered. The investor. They sent emails. They demanded quarterly reports. I wrote them, Genevieve said simply, while you were sleeping. I read your code, Richard. It was good, but your business model was flawed. I fixed the structure in the emails I sent you from the investor. I guided you. I funded you. I built Apex Dynamics from my laptop, while you sat on the couch, complaining that I forgot to buy milk. The humiliation hit Richard like a physical blow. The £2 million, the strategy, the success. It wasn't him. It had never been him. It was the plain housewife he was trying to discard for £20,000. So, Judge Harrison said, looking over the documents with a stunned expression, if Mrs. Galloway, sorry, Her Highness, is the sole owner of Aurora Holdings, and Aurora Holdings owns 60% of Apex Dynamics, then Mr. Galloway is actually a minority shareholder, Dubois finished with a cruel smile, and technically an employee. Richard slammed his hands on the table. I am the CEO. You can't touch me. Actually, Genevieve said, I can. She reached into her battered handbag, the one Richard hated, and pulled out a smartphone. It wasn't the cracked model she usually carried. It was a sleek, black device. I just sent a message to the board of directors, she said. Since Aurora Holdings holds the controlling interest, I have called for an emergency vote of no confidence. You can't do that, Richard gasped. It's done, she said, glancing at the screen. You're fired, Richard. The silence that followed was absolute. Simon Sterling, the shark lawyer, began to slowly pack up his briefcase. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. "Simon!" Richard yelled at his lawyer. "Do something! Sue her!" "Sue a foreign diplomat?" Sterling hissed back. "She has diplomatic immunity, you idiot, and she owns your company. You're on your own." "I'm not done," Genevieve said. She walked back to her table and picked up the document Dubois had brought. "We haven't discussed the divorce settlement yet. You want my money?" Richard asked, his voice trembling. "I have millions in offshore accounts." "I don't want your money, Richard," Genevieve said, a laugh bubbling up, a sound that was both light and terrifying. "The annual maintenance budget for my family's summer palace is more than your entire net worth." She signaled to Dubois. "I want," she said, "reparations for time wasted." Dubois handed a document to the judge. "We are filing a countersuit for emotional distress, defamation of character, and the repayment of the initial loan of £2 million, with interest calculated at 15% per annum, as stipulated in the original Aurora Holdings contract you signed without reading." "I didn't read it because I thought it was free money," Richard cried. "Nothing is free," Genevieve said cold. "Especially not me." Just then, the doors opened again. This time it wasn't just security. A woman walked in. Jessica, Richard's fiancée. She looked frantic. She was holding her phone. "Rick!" she shouted from the gallery, ignoring the bailiff. "Rick, what is going on? Security is at the office. They're escorting everyone out. They locked me out of the server." Richard looked at Jessica, then at Genevieve. Genevieve turned to look at the other woman. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "Hello, Jessica," Genevieve said. "I believe you're wearing the Cartier bracelet Richard bought with the company credit card last month?" Jessica covered her wrist, eyes wide. "That's corporate theft," Dubois noted, writing something down in a small notebook. "We'll add that to the ledger." "Rick," Jessica screamed, "fix this!" I, Richard stammered. He looked at Genevieve, his eyes pleading. "Jen, please. Baby, we can talk about this. I was stressed. I didn't mean what I said about the money. I love you." The room groaned. Even the judge looked disgusted. Genevieve watched him beg. It was pathetic. This was the man she had hidden her identity for? This was the man she had washed socks for? "The hearing is adjourned," Judge Harrison said, slamming his gavel. "I am granting the dissolution of marriage. I am also freezing all assets of Mr. Galloway pending the investigation into corporate theft and the repayment of the Aurora loan." "Jen!" Richard moved toward her, but the two massive guards stepped in front of him, forming a wall of muscle. "My name," she said, her voice cutting through the guards, "is Her Royal Highness. You may bow when I leave." Genevieve turned to Dubois. "Is the car ready?" "The motorcade is outside, Your Highness. Your brother, Guido, the Crown Prince, has flown in. He wishes to have lunch." "Good," she said, shedding the grey cardigan to reveal a silk blouse underneath that shimmered under the court lights. "I'm starving. I haven't had a decent meal in 3 years." She walked towards the exit. She didn't look back. But the story wasn't over. As Richard stood there, ruined, watching his wife leave, he realized something. The prenup, the one he had forced her to sign. "Wait," Richard shouted. "The prenup. You signed a prenup. It says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours." Genevieve stopped at the door. She turned one last time, a small, sad smile on her face. "Yes, Richard, I did sign it. And since Apex Dynamics was built with my money, the prenup protects me from you claiming any part of it. You played yourself." With that, the heavy doors swung shut, leaving Richard Galloway standing in the silence of his own destruction. But for Genevieve, the real challenge was just beginning. Leaving Richard was the easy part. Returning to the royal court of Montvert, a place of vipers, politics, and a family that had never forgiven her for running away, was going to be much harder. And Richard wasn't the type of man to stay down forever. He was desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. The interior of the Bentley Mulsanne was quieter than a tomb. The rain of London had been replaced by the hermetically sealed silence of wealth. Genevieve sat in the back seat, the grey cardigan folded neatly next to her, a relic of a life that had ended 20 minutes ago. Sitting opposite her was Prince Frederick, the Crown Prince of Montvert. He was 40, with the kind of severe, angular beauty that looked better on coins than in person. He was scrolling through a tablet, his face illuminated by the blue light, his expression unreadable. "You look terrible," Frederick said, without looking up. "It's good to see you too, Freddie," Genevieve replied, leaning her head against the cool glass of the window. She watched the London streets blur by. The streets she had walked to save bus fare, the shops she couldn't afford to enter. "How is father?" "Furious," Frederick said, finally locking the tablet and sliding it into the leather pouch of the seat. "He wanted to send the Royal Guard to extract you 3 years ago, when you ran off with that tech bro. He nearly had a stroke." "He wasn't a tech bro when I met him," Genevieve defended weakly. "He was an idealist." "He was a parasite," Frederick corrected sharply. "And you, the Princess Royal, spent 36 months scrubbing his floors. Do you have any idea how much it cost us to keep the paparazzi away from your little suburban experiment? We spent millions bribing editors to kill stories about the waitress who looks like Princess Genevieve." Genevieve closed her eyes. "I just wanted to be normal. And look where normal got you." Frederick gestured to her worn-out shoes, humiliated in a public court. "If Chamberlain Dubois hadn't stepped in with the Aurora Holdings documentation, you would be homeless right now." "I had a plan," she murmured. "Your plan relied on a man having a conscience," Frederick scoffed. "That is not a plan. That is a gamble. And you lost." The car slowed as it approached a private airfield on the outskirts of the city, a Gulfstream G650 with the Montvert crest on the tail was waiting on the tarmac, engines whining. "We are going home, Genevieve," Frederick said, his voice softening just a fraction. "But do not expect a parade. The council is in an uproar. The fact that you used the Royal Investment Fund to capitalize a British tech startup without board approval, that is a problem." "I made the fund 300% profit," Genevieve shot back, a flash of her old fire returning. "Richard's company was successful because I made it successful. The money is safe. The money is frozen," Frederick reminded her, "until the audit is complete. You are walking back into a lion's den, sister. And this time you don't have a husband to hide behind." Meanwhile, back in Kensington, Richard Galloway was discovering the true definition of frozen. He stood in the hallway of the townhouse he had bought 2 years ago. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Glass walls, floating staircases, minimalist art. And the locks had been changed. "Open the damn door!" Richard shouted, pounding on the heavy timber. "I can't do that, sir," a voice came from the intercom. It was the security company. "The deed to this property is held by Aurora Holdings. We have received instructions to vacate the premises immediately." "I live here!" Richard screamed. "My clothes are in there! My laptop!" "Your personal effects have been boxed and placed on the curb, sir." Richard turned around. There, sitting on the wet pavement in the drizzle, were 4 cardboard boxes. It was a pathetic sight. He walked over and kicked one. It burst open, spilling his expensive silk ties into a puddle. His phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Richard, HR just called me. They're suspending me pending an investigation into misappropriation of funds. You said the bracelet was a bonus. You said you approved it. They're talking about jail time, Rick. Don't call me again." "Jess," he yelled at the phone, but the line was dead. He was alone. No wife, no mistress, no house, no company. He sat down on the curb, the rain soaking through his suit. He checked his bank account on his phone. Access denied. The judge's order had been instantaneous. Every account linked to his name was locked down. He had £40 in his wallet and a credit card that was undoubtedly declined. He put his head in his hands. How had he missed it? How had he not seen the way Genevieve read the Financial Times over his shoulder, the way she corrected his grammar and pitch decks, the way the money always appeared just when he needed it? He had been so blinded by his own ego, so convinced of his own genius, that he hadn't realized he was being carried. A black cab slowed down in front of him. The window rolled down. "You look like you've had a rough day, mate," the driver said. Richard looked up. He saw his reflection in the wet car door. He looked deranged. "You have no idea," Richard whispered. Then a thought struck him. A memory. 6 months ago, Genevieve had been cleaning out the attic. She had been obsessed with a box of old journals. She kept them in a small, fireproof safe in the master bedroom closet. She said they were family recipes. But Genevieve didn't cook from recipes. She cooked from memory. Richard scrambled to the boxes on the curb. He tore through them frantically. Shirts, shoes, gym gear. Where was it? Box 3. He ripped the tape off. Inside were his toiletries and a small, heavy metal box. The security team must have just swept everything from the closet into the boxes without checking. Richard held the box. It was locked. He picked up a rock from the garden landscaping and smashed it against the lock mechanism. Once, twice, 3 times. The latch gave way. Inside there were no recipes. There was a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon and a USB drive. Richard picked up the letters. They were written on thick, cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was archaic, elegant. He squinted at the signature on the top letter. "My dearest Genevieve, the situation with the Prime Minister is becoming untenable. If the public finds out about the incident in Monaco, the monarchy will fall. You must keep the accounts hidden." Richard's eyes widened. He grabbed the next letter. The illegitimacy of the child must never be revealed. Richard started to laugh. It was a low, guttural sound that turned into a cackle. He wasn't sure what he was holding, but he knew what it smelled like. It smelled like leverage. He grabbed his phone. He didn't call a lawyer. He dialed a number he had saved from a party years ago. A man he had once considered too sleazy to do business with. "Clive," Richard said into the phone, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "It's Richard Galloway. Yes, the Apex guy. Listen, shut up for a second. I need you to get me a meeting with the editor of the Daily Mail. No, not for a tech piece. I have a story about the royal house of Montvert, and I have receipts. The Principality of Montvert is one of those European microstates that people often forget exists until they see it in a James Bond movie. Nestled in the Alps, it is a fortress of granite peaks, deep blue lakes, and tax shelters." Genevieve stood on the balcony of the summer palace, overlooking the capital city of Val-Saint-Claude. The air was crisp and smelled of pine. It was a world away from the smog of London. She wore a gown of heavy emerald velvet, a stark contrast to the grey cardigan. Her hair was pinned up in an intricate chignon, secured with diamond pins. She looked every inch the princess, but she felt like a prisoner. "You are not to leave the grounds," King Henri had told her upon arrival. He hadn't hugged her. He had simply looked at her with disappointed, icy blue eyes. "You have embarrassed this family. You ran away to play house with a peasant, and now that peasant is dragging our name through the mud." "I handled it, father," she had argued. "You handled nothing," the king had roared. "You created a vacuum, and vacuums draw dirt." Genevieve sighed, gripping the stone railing. She missed the anonymity of London. She missed the days when her biggest worry was whether Richard would like the pot roast. It was a sick thought, she knew. Richard was a monster. But at least in that life, she had been free to walk down the street. "Your Highness," Genevieve turned. It was Chamberlain Dubois. He looked grave. "What is it, Arthur?" "We have a situation," Dubois said. He held out a tablet. "It's the British tabloids. They broke the story an hour ago." Genevieve took the tablet. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "The Princess and the Pauper. Exclusive interview with Richard Galloway." Tech CEO claims he was duped by Princess Genevieve of Montvert. She She lied to me for 3 years, says the heartbroken husband. I built my company from scratch, and she used her royal influence to steal it from me. He's lying, Genevieve said, her hand shaking. He's playing the victim. Read the subheader, Dubois said quietly. Genevieve scrolled down. Plus, shocking revelations about the royal family. Galloway claims to possess private correspondence, linking King Henry to the Monaco scandal and alleges financial fraud within the royal treasury. Genevieve dropped the tablet. It clattered onto the stone floor. The safe, she whispered. The safe in the closet. I forgot to empty it. What was in the safe, Genevieve? Dubois asked, his voice losing its usual deference. The letters from Uncle Leopold, she said, her face pale, and the backup drive for the Aurora accounts, specifically the off-book transactions father authorized in 2015 to cover up the incident with the Italian model. Dubois closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Merde. He has the drive. He says he does, Dubois said, and he is threatening to release the data unless we settle. How much? He isn't asking for £20,000 anymore, Dubois said grimly. He wants 50 million, and the rights to Apex Dynamics returned to him. We can't give him the company, Genevieve said. He'll run it into the ground in a month. He's incompetent. The king is considering paying it, Dubois said. What? Genevieve gasped. No, that's blackmail. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We do when the terrorist is holding a grenade in our living room, a voice boomed from the doorway. King Henry walked onto the balcony. He looked older than he had yesterday. The stress was etching deep lines into his face. Father, you cannot pay him, Genevieve pleaded. If you pay him, he wins. He humiliated me. He used me. And now he's robbing us? He has the Monaco files, Genevieve, the king shouted. Do you know what happens if those get out? The European Commission will launch an investigation into our banking sector. We could lose our sovereignty. We could lose everything. He's bluffing, Genevieve said. Richard is a coward. He won't release them because if he does, he loses his leverage. I am not willing to take that risk, the king said. I have sent a team to London to negotiate. We will pay the 50 million. We will give him back the company. No, Genevieve said firmly. The king stared at her. Excuse me? I said no. Genevieve stepped forward. She wasn't the little girl who ran away anymore. She was a woman who had built a multi-million-pound company from a laptop while her husband slept. She was a woman who had survived Richard Galloway. I am the CEO of Aurora Holdings, Genevieve said, her voice steady. The funds are under my signature. You cannot transfer 50 million without my biometric authorization, and I will not give it. You defy your king? Henri hissed. I am saving my king, Genevieve corrected. Richard is greedy. If you give him 50 million, he will be back in 6 months asking for 100. You don't feed a shark, father. You kill it. And how do you propose to do that? Frederick asked, stepping out from behind the king. He is in London, surrounded by press. If we touch him, we look like villains. We don't need to touch him, Genevieve said, a cold, calculating look entering her eyes, the same look she had worn in the courtroom. Richard thinks he has the upper hand because he has the files, but he doesn't understand what he's looking at. He's not a financier. He's a coder. Explain, Dubois said. The Monaco files, Genevieve said, pacing the balcony. They are encrypted. The drive is encrypted. He can't open them without the key. He says he has read the letters, Frederick noted. The letters are damaging, yes, but they are hearsay. The proof is on the drive, and he can't open the drive. So he is bluffing about the financial fraud. He's guessing, Genevieve said, but he's frantic. He's broke. He needs money now. He can't wait for a long negotiation. She turned to Dubois. Get the jetter ready, she said. You are not going back to London, the king forbade her. No, Genevieve smiled, and it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm going to Zurich. Richard wants a war. I'm going to nuke him. What are you going to do? Frederick asked, unnerved by his sister's intensity. Richard claims he built Apex Dynamics, Genevieve said. He claims he is the genius. But the source code, the core algorithm that makes the software work, he didn't write that part. I did. The three men stared at her. You? Richard had always called her uneducated. The family had always thought her merely artistic. I have a lot of free time when my husband ignores me, Genevieve shrugged. I learned Python. I learned C++. I optimized the kernel, and like any good developer, I left a back door. A back door? Dubois asked. A kill switch, Genevieve corrected. If I activate it, Apex Dynamics ceases to function. The software becomes bricked. The value of the company drops to 0 in seconds. But that destroys your investment too, Frederick pointed out. Aurora loses millions. It's a sunk cost, Genevieve said. I am willing to burn my own house down if it means Richard burns with it. If the company is worthless, he has nothing to bargain for regarding the business. And as for the letters, she looked at her father. Let him publish them. Let him tell the world about Monaco. Genevieve, the king gasped. The world has changed, father, she said. People don't care about royal affairs anymore. But they do care about blackmail. We go public first. We control the narrative. We say a desperate, abusive ex-husband is trying to extort the royal family with forged documents. It is a high-stakes gamble, Dubois murmured, looking at her with newfound respect. I'm all in, Genevieve said. Frederick, call the press secretary. Tell them I am holding a press conference. Tomorrow morning in Paris. And Richard? Frederick asked. Send him a message, Genevieve said. Tell him I'm coming for him. And tell him to check line 404 of the source code. Richard Galloway was feeling good. No, he was feeling invincible. He was currently crashing on the leather sofa of Clive the Weasel Barrett's flat in Shoreditch. It wasn't the Kensington townhouse, but it had a certain bachelor pad charm, if you ignored the smell of stale beer and the fact that Clive was currently shouting at his crypto broker in the kitchen. Richard took a sip of lukewarm coffee and refreshed his Twitter feed. #Justice for Richard was trending. #Gold Digger Princess was number 2. You see this, Clive? Richard yelled, scrolling through the comments. The public loves me. They see a self-made man who got hustled by the establishment. I'm a hero of the working class. You're a legend, mate, Clive shouted back. But when do we get the payout? My landlord is asking about the rent. Relax, Richard said, leaning back. The king will cave. They can't afford the Monaco leak. 50 million is pocket change to them. By tomorrow we'll be drinking champagne in Dubai. His phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. It was short. Line 404. Gee. Richard frowned. Genevieve? Why would she be texting him about code? He hadn't looked at the raw source code of Apex Dynamics in 2 years. He had been too busy being the visionary CEO to bother with the grunt work. Curiosity gnawed at him. He opened his laptop, the only thing he had managed to salvage from the office before security threw him out. He booted up the development environment. It took a moment to load the massive codebase. He navigated to kernel/core_logic.cpp. He scrolled down. Line 400, line 402, line 404. There it was. A single line of code he had never noticed before, because it was hidden inside a comment block that looked like standard copyright text. If system_date, February 12th, 2026, and active_user, =Genevieve_root, execute_protocol, scorched_earth. Richard blinked. Scorched earth? He checked the date on his laptop. It was February 13th. Clive, Richard said, his voice trembling. What time is it? 9:10. Why? The markets just opened, Richard whispered. On his screen, the code began to execute. It wasn't just a line of text anymore. It was a living thing. A terminal window popped up, black with green text, scrolling faster than he could read. Initiating protocol. Bypassing firewalls. Target client databases. Action. Irreversible encryption. No, Richard gasped. He tried to close the window. It wouldn't close. He tried to force quit the application. Access denied. Clive, the internet! Cut the internet! What? Pull the bloody router out of the wall! Richard screamed, scrambling over the coffee table. He ripped the Ethernet cable out of his laptop, but the screen didn't stop. Connection severed, switching to offline destruct mode, deleting local repositories, corrupting backups. It was a virus, a logic bomb, and it wasn't just on his laptop. It was hard-coded into the update, pushed to every single client server worldwide at 9 a.m. His phone began to ring. It was the VP of Operations at Apex. "Richard, what is happening?" the VP screamed. "The dashboard is gone. The clients, Ford, Sony, the NHS, they're all calling. Their data is turning into gibberish. It's all just emojis of crowns. Thousands of little crown emojis replacing financial records." "Shut it down," Richard yelled. "Turn off the servers." "We can't. It's embedded in the BIOS. It's eating everything, Richard. The stock price just dropped 40% in 3 minutes. We're being halted for volatility." Richard stared at his laptop screen. The scrolling text stopped. A final message appeared, blinking innocently. "Error 404. Husband not found. System purged. Have a nice day." Richard dropped the phone. The kill switch Genevieve had warned him about wasn't a threat. It was a promise. She hadn't just broken the company. She had vaporized it. The asset he was holding hostage, the company he demanded $50 million for, was now worth precisely 0. "Clive," Richard said, his voice hollow. "I think I need a drink." "Forget the drink," Clive said, walking into the room with his own phone pressed to his ear. He looked pale. "That was the landlord. He says there are police cars outside. Like, a lot of police cars." Richard ran to the window. Below, on the rainy street, 3 black vans were pulling up. Men in suits were jumping out. They weren't regular police. They were serious fraud office agents. And leading them was a man Richard recognized from the news, the royal attaché to the British government. "They're not here for the rent, are they?" Clive squeaked. "No," Richard realized, the true horror setting in. "They're here for the blackmail." Paris was burning, not with fire but with camera flashes. The grand ballroom of the Hotel Ritz had been transformed into a global stage. Every major news network was there. BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera. The world was hungry for the story of the scammer princess. But when Genevieve walked onto the stage, the narrative shifted instantly. She didn't look like a scammer. She didn't look like a victim. She wore a sharp, white pantsuit that looked like armor. Her hair was loose, falling in soft waves around a face that was composed, serious, and strikingly beautiful. She stood at the podium. She didn't have notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and steady. "For 3 years, I lived as Genevieve Sterling. I lived in a 1-bedroom flat in Leeds. I took the bus. I shopped at Tesco. And I fell in love with a man I thought shared my values." She paused, looking directly into the camera lens. "I was wrong." A hush fell over the room. "Yesterday, my former husband, Mr. Richard Galloway, attempted to extort the royal house of Montvert for £50 million. He claimed to possess damaging information about my family. He claimed he was the victim of a royal conspiracy." She pressed a button on the clicker in her hand. A massive screen behind her lit up. It showed a bank statement. "This is the initial capitalization for Apex Dynamics," she said. £2 million, transferred from my personal trust. "This," she clicked again, showing a series of emails, "is the correspondence where I, writing under the pseudonym The Investor, instructed Mr. Galloway on how to structure his own company because he lacked the business acumen to do so himself." Murmurs rippled through the press corps. The emails were damning. They showed Richard asking basic questions, making rookie mistakes, and Genevieve patiently correcting him. "Mr. Galloway did not build Apex Dynamics," Genevieve said. "I did. I built it to give my husband a legacy. I built it because I loved him, and when I asked for a divorce, he tried to sell my own family's secrets back to me." "But what about the Monaco files?" a reporter from The Sun shouted. "He says he has proof of corruption." Genevieve smiled. It was a sad, tired smile. "The Monaco files refers to a private medical matter involving my uncle," she said. "He was receiving treatment for early-onset dementia in a facility in Monaco. We kept it private to protect his dignity. The illicit payments Richard found were simply hospital bills paid through a shell company to ensure his privacy." She clicked the screen again. A medical report appeared, redacted, but clear enough to prove her point. "There is no corruption," she said. "There is only a family trying to care for a sick relative, and a man who tried to weaponize that pain for profit." The room erupted. The scandal had evaporated. In its place was a story of a greedy, incompetent man trying to blackmail a grieving family. "Regarding Apex Dynamics," Genevieve continued, raising her voice over the noise, "as of this morning, the company has ceased operations. I have dissolved the entity. I would rather destroy my own creation than let it be used as a bargaining chip by an abuser." She leaned into the microphone. "Richard, if you are watching this, it's over. The files you stole are encrypted with a 256-bit key that only I possess. You have nothing. You are nothing." At that exact moment, across the channel in London, Richard Galloway was watching the live stream on his phone in the back of a police van. He saw Genevieve on the screen, radiant, powerful, untouchable. He heard her words, and then he heard the heavy steel door of the van slam shut, plunging him into darkness. The Monaco files on the USB drive in his pocket were useless. He couldn't open them. He couldn't prove anything. And even if he could, she had already spun the story. She had inoculated the public. If he released them now, he would just look like a monster attacking a dementia patient. He had played poker against the house, and the house always wins. Back in Paris, Genevieve stepped away from the podium. The flashbulbs were blinding. "Your Highness, Your Highness! Will you return to Montvert? Will you marry again?" She didn't answer. She walked off the stage, flanked by Chamberlain Dubois and her brother. As they reached the green room, Frederick let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "That was masterful," he admitted. "The dementia angle? Uncle Leopold doesn't have dementia. He has a gambling addiction." "The public doesn't need to know that," Genevieve said, taking a sip of water. "Whatever was in those files is irrelevant now. I destroyed the credibility of the source. No newspaper will touch Richard's evidence now. They'll just see it as more lies." "You are terrifying," Frederick said, shaking his head. "I'm glad you're on our side." "I'm not on anyone's side, Freddie," she said, looking at herself in the mirror. "The plain housewife was gone forever. I'm just cleaning up my mess." "So," Dubois asked, checking his watch, "the jet is fueled. We can be back in Montvert by dinner. The king wants to host a victory banquet." Genevieve paused. She looked at the reflection of the woman in the white suit. A princess, a CEO, a destroyer of worlds. "No," she said. "No?" Dubois blinked. "I'm not going back to Montvert," she said. "Not yet." "But where will you go?" Frederick asked. "Richard is in custody. The company is gone. You have nothing in London." "I have one thing left to do," she said. "Richard wasn't the only one who betrayed me. There was someone else. Someone who knew about my identity from the beginning and sold me out to him." Frederick frowned. "Who?" "Jessica," Genevieve said coldly. "She wasn't just his mistress. She was my friend first. She was the one who introduced us. And I just found out. She was on the payroll of a rival firm the whole time." She turned to her brother, a dangerous glint in her eye. "I took down the King of Apex. Now I'm going to take down the Queen." Jessica stood on the terrace of the Shard, looking out over the glittering London skyline. The wind whipped her hair, but she didn't care. She took a sip of her champagne. Richard was in custody. Apex Dynamics was gone. But Jessica? Jessica was a survivor. She had played the grieving fiancé perfectly for the cameras earlier that day. She had told the police she knew nothing about Richard's blackmail scheme. She had painted herself as another victim of his manipulation. To fresh starts, she whispered to herself, raising her glass. She checked her phone. A deposit of £500,000 had just cleared in her offshore account in the Caymans. It was her payment from Zenith Systems, Apex's biggest rival. She had been feeding them Richard's client lists for 2 years. With Apex destroyed, Zenith would absorb the entire market share. She was going to be their new VP of marketing. Enjoying the view? Jessica froze. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the concrete. She turned around. Genevieve was standing there. She wasn't wearing the white suit from the press conference anymore. She was wearing a black trench coat, her hands deep in her pockets. She looked like a shadow that had come to life. "Genevieve," Jessica breathed, her voice trembling. I was just celebrating," Genevieve finished for her. She walked closer, the heels of her boots clicking ominously on the terrace floor. "You always did like the high life, Jess. Even when we were sharing that awful flat in Brixton, remember? You used to steal my tips to buy lipstick." "I didn't steal them," Jessica said, backing away until she hit the railing. "I borrowed them. Look, Jen, I'm sorry about Richard. He was a monster. I tried to stop him." "Stop lying," Genevieve said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was bored. "I know about Zenith." Jessica's eyes went wide. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please," Genevieve sighed. "I owned the servers you were stealing data from. Did you really think I wouldn't notice a massive data leak to a Cayman IP address every Tuesday at 3 a.m.? I let you do it, Jessica. You let me?" "I needed Richard to fail," Genevieve explained calmly. "I needed his company to bleed just enough so he would stay desperate. So he would keep needing me. But then, you got greedy. You didn't just steal data. You stole my husband." Genevieve pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "I just had a very interesting meeting with the board of directors at Zenith Systems," Genevieve said. "They won't talk to you," Jessica scoffed, trying to regain her composure. "They hate you. You're the competition." "Actually," Genevieve smiled, "I'm their new majority shareholder." Jessica stopped breathing. "You see," Genevieve continued, walking to the edge of the balcony, "when I crashed Apex Dynamics this morning, the entire tech sector took a hit. Zenith's stock price dropped by 18% in panic selling. It was a bargain, so I bought it." She turned to look at Jessica, her eyes cold as ice. "I own Zenith now. I own the company that paid you. I own the servers where you stored your stolen data. And I own the evidence of your insider trading." "Jen, please," Jessica begged, tears finally spilling over. "We were friends. Best friends. I was jealous, okay? You had everything. Even when you were poor, you had this way about you. Like you were better than everyone else. I just wanted to win for once." "And you almost did," Genevieve said softly. "But you forgot one thing. You don't win against royalty, Jessica. You only survive if we let you." The elevator doors pinged open. 2 police officers stepped out. "Jessica Vance?" one of them asked. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of corporate espionage and insider trading." Jessica looked at the officers, then back at Genevieve. "You planned this," she hissed. "You planned all of it. The court, the crash, the buyout. You're not a victim. You're a psychopath." "I'm a queen," Genevieve corrected her, "and a queen protects her kingdom. Goodbye, Jessica." As the officers led a screaming Jessica away in handcuffs, Genevieve didn't watch. She turned back to the view of London. The city lights were beautiful. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother, Prince Frederick. "The jet is waiting. Are you coming home?" Genevieve looked at the message. She thought about the castle in Montvert, the stuffy dinners, the protocols, the silence. Then she looked at the city below, a city of chaos, of noise, of opportunity. She had just destroyed one tech empire and bought another. She had played the game and won. She typed a reply. No, send my things to the penthouse at 1 Hyde Park. I have a company to run. Genevieve pocketed her phone. She took a deep breath of the cold London air. She wasn't Genevieve the waitress anymore. She wasn't even just Princess Genevieve of Montvert. She was Genevieve Galloway, CEO of Zenith. And she was just getting started. And just like that, the waitress who was humiliated in court became the most powerful woman in London. Richard lost his freedom, Jessica lost her future, and Genevieve, well, she found her true self. She realized that being a queen isn't about wearing a crown. It's about knowing your worth and never letting anyone, not a husband, not a friend, not a boss, treat you like a pauper. She didn't just survive the game. She rewrote the rules. So what do you think? Did Genevieve go too far with the kill switch, or did Richard and Jessica get exactly what they deserved? I want to hear your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of revenge, betrayal, and royal justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We release new dramas every week that are even crazier than this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.